Well, I think it was that weekend that the Midwest Republican Conference was being held in Chicago. So I went with poll in hand and met with George Bush, and he brought in a guy by the name of Dean Birch. Dean Birch was a great guy. He was Goldwater's campaign manager in 1964.
Yeah, I remember him. Yep.
And I laid it all out before them. Here's the results. You can't, Nixon's going to kill us. Keep him out of the district. The stuff hits the fan. I subsequently learned after the election what had happened. A friend, I can't remember which one now, a national reporter invited Janet and I to dinner one night, and he said what really happened is Teeter, Bob Teeter, who ran the poll, confided in Deardorff, John Deardorff, who was a political consultant, had worked for Rockefeller, and John Lindsay in New York was. And they had told Jack Sherman that I was trying to. This is what happened. I was trying.
A national columnist.
Who was a national. Well, then was working for the Baltimore Sun.
Right.
And they had told him, and so that finally, after years, explained why Jack Sherman was the first one that called me. But to say, are you trying to keep Nixon out of Michigan? Of course, I'm not going to say. No. I really wasn't. I was trying to. It was up to Sparling to say.
Yeah.
But anyways. I left home. By the time when I came home on the lawn outside this window, there was 11 cameras waiting for me. And it was just national. I was trying to keep Nixon out. Well, Sparling got his way. Nixon came in, had a marvelous day with the president. We greeted him at the airport in Saginaw. He got off the plane. I've got pictures, Bill, that he looks like death warmed over. His beard is worse than it was in the first Kennedy debate in 1960. And he's shaking hands. He goes by me, and Mr. President Bill McLaughlin, welcome to Michigan. He goes, I'm too much. And he stops dead in his tracks. And he turns around and says, I've heard of you. Oh. I got to ride with this guy for the rest of the day. So anyways, the trip included a motorcade through Saginaw, through Bay City, and through the entire Thumb. It was a magical day. The people were out in droves. It was festive, the whole thing. I'm sure it was the best day of the rest of his life that Nixon ever had. But what people didn't understand was they weren't cheering Nixon, cheering the office.
Yeah.
And we got beat bad in that Republican district. And again, the after-election polls showed Republicans voted in records they never had before, and they all voted Democratic.
So, did you have another face-off with Ronald Reagan over this whole situation with polls?
Well, at the same day that I was showing George, the next day from George Bush, was showing him and Dean Birch the poll, I had picked up word that Ronald Reagan, who was the keynote speaker at the Saturday night banquet, was going to again blame the party. I got hold of some of his people and said, I need to sit down with the governor. I don't want him to embarrass himself. So I came into a room with Reagan and all his people there, and Governor, here's the story. And I laid out and went over line by line by line. And I might have even had Teeter with me, who did the poll, for authenticating it.
Right.
That it was Watergate killed us. That's why I had hoped we had convinced the governor of California. Went out, I was sitting at the head table, and I was just as shocked as he read his speech, ripping the party for losing the 2 seats. The poll meant nothing to him. And so I then became disillusioned with the people from California.
Yeah, he stayed on message, in other words.
Yeah. That's what his cue cards had already been written. He wasn't going to change the cue card.
What was the reaction of the Michigan congressional delegation, at least the Republicans, to the impeachment proceedings against President Richard Nixon?
Most of the people in the Michigan delegation were close personal friends of Richard Nixon. They were like Bob Griffin. Bob Griffin, after Nixon resigned, cried. I mean, he was, and I used to go at least once a month, or not more than those times, to meet with the delegation at a breakfast to bring them up to date. I brought the polls, I brought everything else. And people like Al Cederberg in the 10th District, Charlie Chamberlain in the 6th District, they just wouldn't believe me. They wanted to believe their boss, the guy in the White House. As a result, they lost their elections. They shouldn't have. They should have, had they only listened and governed themselves accordingly, they could have overcome it. But they didn't. And they paid the price.
So when Nixon resigned, what was your feeling then? and Ford's president, and only a month later comes the pardon.
Well, the night Nixon resigned is the most memorable night of my political life. We had gone to, the primary had been on Tuesday. On Thursday, we went to McLaughlin to meet with the governor to plan campaign strategy, to get ready for the state convention and all that. We went, rumor came out during the day Nixon was going to be on television. I don't remember knowing in advance what he was going to do. We went to the hotel. We had dinner at the Grand Hotel, and Dan Musser, the general manager of the hotel, the owner of the hotel, had arrived a private room for us off the lobby with a television in there to watch. And so we went in and we sat and watched. I know I was stunned when he said, "Tomorrow at noon I shall resign the President of the United States." Bill, when I came out of the room, we got up, and I think there was Milliken, Mrs. Milliken, Joyce Weeks, and myself, I think, and a state trooper were the only people in that room. I was the closest to the door. I got up and we walked out. Usually the Grand Hotel was abuzz with noise. I walked out, and on the carpet you could have heard a pin drop. It was that quiet. And I looked up, there had been 600-800 people lined up looking at our room by the windows. There had been television set up for them to see it. And I walked out and I'm, wow, look at all these, well, wonder what's going on. Milliken came out of the room, and it started quietly. And it started down the line to a crescendo. Television lights came down to the stairs halfway through the lobby that leads to the ballroom. And I saw people like the Jimmy Harringtons, the Tim Skubiks, the real good guys.
Mm-hmm. Really? No kidding.
I knew that night Sandy Levin was going to stand on the lawn next to me at the inaugural, because Bill Milliken, despite anything, was still going to win that election.
Right.
It was amazing.
Right.
And I can't tell the story to this day without tearing up. It was that emotional.
In other words, just the reaction that they had somebody that they could be proud of, a governor that they loved, who was everything that Nixon wasn't. I'm
not sure everybody was from Michigan, but the contrast between Bill Milliken and Richard Nixon was so great at that moment. It was just a magical number. I've never forgotten it.
That's a great story. What about the Ford pardon?
This was another time that, I never have a television on here in the morning. For some reason, I had a television on in the kitchen, and all of a sudden the president's on there saying he's pardoned Richard Nixon. And the phone started ringing, the television crews around the thing. Oh my God. Jerry Terhorst I had just gotten a letter back from Jerry Terhorst who was a former reporter with the Grand Rapids Press, who Ford had hired as his press secretary. I had just gotten a letter back from him thanking him for my letter of congratulations when this thing hit, and 2 days later Jerry Terhorst resigned. It blew everybody figured there was a deal in there. I never did. I wished he hadn't done it, but history proves that one person was right. It was Jerry Ford. Had he not, I don't know if you were, Washington in those days were obsessed with Nixon. People would get up in the middle of the night to get the Washington Post to see what was going on with Watergate. You know it was going to go on for ad infinitum until something was resolved. They would have, we got to hang them, we got to shoot them, we got to put them in jail, we got to do something. Ford was spending so much of his time on Nixon that he couldn't do the job of president, and so he decided to do it. It was a profile in courage, but it was the right thing to do. It shocked me that day, and it was blamed for his loss at the polls. I thought there was other reasons other than that. He could have overcome it.
Another development in 1974, Jim Brickley, who had been lieutenant governor, decided to take the presidency of Eastern Michigan University. So Bill Milliken picked Jim Damon, a state representative from Troy, to be his running mate. But then some unpleasantness occurred just before the election. Can you tell us a little about that, or what happened?
Jim Damon was, I thought, an ideal candidate. I had a routine that I always did at